Hey everybody, Casey Sutton here with another new podcast as part of our Public Sector Podcast series. In this podcast, sponsored by Intel, we'll be highlighting Lenovo Services and how you can position them with your public sector customers. So joining me here today to share his insights is Mr. Robert Kelly, Senior Manager with Lenovo Services. So hey Robert, how you doing?
Great. How are you doing, Casey?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. We're really excited to have you in the studio with us today.
I'm excited. Thanks again for having me. Looking forward to it.
So Robert, let's start by just talking services in general for a second. Why are they so important for public sector organizations?
Sure, that's a great question, Casey. Public sector, like others, are challenged all the time, obviously, with their budgets. Right, budget is a big one, whether it's a revenue driver or cost reduction. But the budgets definitely challenge the public sector, and I think if you drive down into that even more, public sector, because they're challenged and they don't get as much funding, oftentimes their IT staff is minimized. They are certainly strapped with a lot of older legacy technology, right? And oftentimes they take larger leaps into the new technology. So getting there, having that roadmap and understanding how to get there off of the older technology is certainly a challenge they face, right? Innovation isn't always, a strong point over in the public sector. So keeping up with that technology is something they need. And then there's compliance and data security, right? And disaster recovery. What do they do with this old equipment? What are they doing to manage uptime? How are they getting rid of some of the end of life equipment, right? And that gets into conversations of like asset recovery, if you will. These are things that public sector sees a little bit more as a challenge than some of our other segments.
So now that we know how important services are for organizations, let's dive into some of our own offerings. Let's start with how Lenovo can help with PC management over the life cycle. Can you tell us a little bit more on that?
That's another great question, Casey, and one obviously right in my wheelhouse. So what I always want to tell our sales team is leverage Lenovo Professional Services and do it up front. In our experience, it often happens after the sale of hardware, but where we can really help your clients is understanding their business outcomes. What are they trying to do at the company, whether it's drive revenue, quality? We really want to understand that up front. Then we can help them with our services set to understand how we can enable the technology, how we can improve processes. So that's where the planning, right, design phase, if you will, where we send in one of our solution architects and technical specialists to whiteboard and truly understand and help customers plan for this, either a new rollout, an upgrade. How can we help them just tap into our manufacturing, right, and the supply chain? How can we leverage everything Lenovo has, from the technology to shipping and logistics to the actual deployment and service themselves? How can we tie it all together? And then we want to help understand from a deployment perspective. Now we're going to put these things out into the end user environment. So how can we reduce technician touch time? How can we enable remote users in branch locations to maybe upgrade themselves if that's something the client has a tolerance for? So how do we drive customer satisfaction through some automation, some self-deploy, and reduce disruption? And then obviously once you're in there and the assets are at the desk, we have to support them, right? So we want to understand the right support model, the right SLAs, and do we need next day support or not based on what the customers are trying to drive? So we want to be there from the beginning to understand and make sure that we are designing a solution that is going to hit all of the business needs that they have. And then lastly, I manage the PMO, so it's something that is near and dear to my heart, but project management across all of it. So you might have, my project manager is going to get assigned, be a single, point of contact to help with orders, right? Working with the ISR, when orders are going to hit, when they're going to be delivered, when do I need technicians out at a certain site, and everything, the communication that goes with that, the risk management that happens with that. So as you can tell, I get even more passionate when we talk PMO.
Good. I love it, though. But I think we can agree that that's all pretty comprehensive, which I think really allows us to tailor our services to what each individual customer needs. And for those customers who want a deeper level of service, they want more help from us, how can we support them in that case? Can you share a little bit about Lenovo's Premier support?
Absolutely. And this is where we can sometimes quickly get into buzzwords, but they're all extremely real. Okay, it's not just fads in an IT. This is real stuff. The enterprise landscape is evolving, and I know we've been hearing that for a while. But data center convergence, big data analytics, you hear about the cloud, virtualization. It's just making IT environments extremely complex. Right, we have more hardware and software vendors or players in the mix, mobility, uptime. I mean, it's a very complex world that we're in. So the driving need for a true enterprise class provider such as Lenovo Premier Support is going to step in and give our clients that support that they need. I mean, everyone's been through the level 1 help desk where it's this scripted kind of triage call. Customers in this environment can't, they can't deal with that. They need unscripted, high-level technicians supporting them. They need dedicated premier phone numbers, right, to get to that elite technician. And then when they're dealing with the life cycle, they want a technical account manager. They want a single point of contact who is going to help them with where are my parts, what's happening with this escalation, and that's something they get with Premier Support. And then, of course, hardware, software support, next day warranty, prioritization of labor and parts. That all adds to the full experience. That's going to help them get through the rush of uptime and the criticality of what they're doing in this really complex world.
Robert, you've mentioned how crucial uptime is for all of our end users, and I think that one piece that can really help there is diagnostic tools. And I don't think a lot of our customers realize that Lenovo has offerings in this particular space. Can you take just a second to highlight our PC diagnostic services and how we can actually help customers empower their own users when help is needed?
Absolutely. So Lenovo Diagnostics, right? It contains a full suite of quick and extended tests that include things like memory storage, such as SSD and SATA drives, right? Optical, wireless, it goes on, motherboard, CPU, RAID. These are tools that are available as bootable or downloadable packages, right? And they can be run Windows, they could be run under Linux operating systems. And these diagnostic tools, they span the Lenovo Solution Center, right? Professional diagnostic tools and Lenovo bootable diagnostics are right there to help our users. Again, it's all about the experience, quick uptime, quick diagnostics. You got to figure out what's wrong really quick so that you can fix it. And we have the diagnostic tools there to make it happen.
Another thing that we've mentioned is just the complexity of IT environments today. And folks do have so many parts and pieces that have to come together to create their full solution. So while we're on that topic, let's continue the conversation a little bit with a mention of Lenovo's PC as a service offerings. How can we help simplify all of that complexity with something like PC as a service?
Yeah, PC as a service is really a very comprehensive solution set, right? We take our world-class hardware, we add that with our services, globally managed, right, those capabilities in a fully managed subscription model, right? So you have a single vendor, single point of contact, another buzzword, right? TCO reduction or total cost of ownership reduction. And you get this on-demand flexibility. And And everything we talk about, right? You hear about, imaging. You hear about support and asset recovery. These all come together in a single solution, right? They get personal options. They can have multiple OS support, lower IT costs, and it's a predictable price that could be fed into a TCO calculator. So it really is the kitchen sink, simplified, managed under Lenovo, single point of contact, and a subscription base. So it's very, very predictable, and they get essentially everything they need, and we reduce a lot of that complexity that we've been talking about.
Which I think is what everyone's really hoping for at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So this has all been really, really incredible information, but I do have just one more question for you before we wrap up this episode. But what would be the top things that you would like our sales reps to keep in mind when it comes to having that services conversation with their customers?
One of the biggest things that I would like to remind everyone is that you have a services sales executive who is aligned to the regions. Okay, so get them engaged early, right? We want to make sure we're understanding before the hardware starts shipping how the customer is going to leverage it. What are their business outcomes? What are their goals? And how can Lenovo Professional Services enable the hardware, okay, as well as the full life cycle for your customers, right? We want to be very sticky in the accounts, and we can absolutely help you drive that conversation. We want to keep in mind that services, they play different roles depending on, or there's a different angle depending on the size of an organization. So for instance, lots of larger organizations, they already have their IT staff and they do services. So they're really only maybe receptive to some of our offerings, right? Whereas some of the smaller organizations, they may need help with a larger set, like a help desk, building out a full help desk, especially growth companies, right? So services, and I know this is where some folks get a little nervous, right? Because services is so customizable, even within the same verticals, right? It is very customizable. So leverage your services team to have that conversation. And then, of course, don't forget Windows 10 is here. Whether your customers are completely, rolling it out, or they're just there because of maybe the chipset, or they're just going with the OS. But Windows 10 is there. We don't have to dive into that here. But again, your services team is there to help your customers along that journey, whether it's happening now or they're not planning for it for another 12 to 18 months. We can certainly be there up front having that conversation.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of today's podcast. Robert, I want to thank you so much for talking with us today. And for all you sales folks, remember that we have even more great info to share with you about all of Lenovo's service offerings. Learn more from our services training at Grow at Lenovo, and channel partners can find more information at lenovopartnernetwork.com. I want to thank Intel again for sponsoring our podcast. And don't forget, you can access other podcasts by visiting our Public Sector Podcast YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.